Mighty opinion number 1. And it's all about ComicsGate. ComicsGate. Okay. Where do we begin? In order to have a conversation about ComicsGate, I have to kind of explain ComicsGate to the uninitiated. So here's like a Reader's Digest version intro to ComicsGate. So there was like this in the mid 2000s, like 2000, I want to say 5-ish or whatever. There was this shift in management at the big two, Marvel and DC, in the comic book industry at large. It's a political shift of ideologies, and there was a big influx of people on the left, and so there was a crisis of types, a civil war of types. You could call it a civil crisis, where it seemed it became this influx of people on the far left versus non-far leftists, because it's not like it was people on the left versus people on the right, because like even people in the center who didn't want to sort of bend the knee to these like ideas being pushed, they were ousted too, or they were made to be quiet. And so you have all of these guys on the right and politically, and guys in the middle who were just going through their lives, doing comics, doing it for years, doing it well, suddenly being systematically pushed out of the comic book industry. And at the time, the comic book industry, for the most part, and it kind of still is, up until now, is Marvel and DC. And so the media started calling these guys, of course, the usual names. They'd call them Nazis, they'd call them all types of bad things. But one term they started using kind of stuck, and it was ComicsGate. They were trying to tie these comic book guys to the bad guys in the Gamergate thing, and so they called them ComicsGate. But kind of like we black people did with the derogatory term nigga, people that were being called ComicsGate, they were like, yo, nah, we're gonna own that, we're gonna rock with that, like, yeah, we're ComicsGate, like, that's us. And what? And so these ComicsGate guys, again, many of them pros, veterans of the comic book industry, a lot of them guys and gals who had dreams of getting into the comics industry, realizing that's not really an avenue anymore because they don't want to be subservient to those ideas. They don't want to bend the knee to like weird politics just to make comics. And so these pros and these newcomers, they sort of formed this community online, mostly on YouTube, called the ComicsGate community, or called ComicsGate. And so now ComicsGate are now, through the power of YouTube and getting the word out with social media, they're now going on these crowdfunding platforms, and making these crowdfunding campaigns and selling comic books like hotcakes. Selling comic books like you wouldn't believe. And they're doing it independently, and they're doing it well. Like, it's not like they're doing it under one central, like, company. It's just a bunch of indie creators all sort of locking arms and, like, supporting one another and fighting against the tide and winning. And so that's what's happening. And so, yeah, so there's this group called ComicsGate, and the question is for someone who wants to get into comics like myself. The existential question is to ComicsGate or not to ComicsGate. And I'm gonna let you know right now, I'm ComicsGate. I am. I am a conservative person, politically. I don't know, in whatever other way you might want to figure that out, look at it. I'm a conservative guy. I don't plan on putting tons and tons of politics on this channel, but there's just something about me. But me knowing that about myself, and knowing that comic books, as it stands, at Marvel and DC, at the big two, and to another point, at Image Comics, where where indie creators are supposed to be like the lifeblood, that's not really a thing that they're into these days. It's actually something they're very anti. They're anti-conservative in their hiring, in their treatment of customers, in the way they put out media, in the way they deal with people. And so, if I wanted to get into comics, which I do, my choices were go work for one of these companies and try to hide, I guess, who I am or what I believe, and just shut up and stay quiet and never be myself, or go the independent route and get in the trenches with the other people going the independent route, the anti-establishment route, which is ComicsGate. And I see a lot of people in ComicsGate whose comics I used to read when they were making comics at Marvel and DC. Chief among them, Ethan Van Sciver. Like, I didn't, before all this controversy happened over the last few years, or maybe like more than a few years at this point, I didn't even know Ethan Van Sciver's name. I just knew him by his art. He was, that guy that draws the super cool Green Lantern comics that I like, right? And I remember when he first went to YouTube, I didn't know it was like a, him being kicked out of comics thing. I just remember being on YouTube, seeing a thumbnail of his art and being like, oh yeah, I love that Green Lantern comic book, not even knowing the name of the artist, but just knowing the art when I saw it and knowing that I loved it, and clicking on his video and being like, oh, the guy who makes those super sweet comics at DC that I like, he has a YouTube now? Sweet, subscribe. I think I was one of Ethan's first 20 or 30 or 40 subscribers. And then just to see the things that would happen to him over time. I came to watch cool artist videos of him drawing comic book characters that I liked. And then he started updating people on his life and what was happening, and I got to see it happen there. And then I read articles outside of his Facebook or his YouTube channel, where people were following him in places and harassing his family, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy, this is weird. And then I saw him be enough's enough, and be like, yo, I'm gonna make my own comics. You can kick me out of your company, but you can't kick me out of the industry, because I'm a guy who makes comic books, and you can't stop me from making comic books. This is around the same time I subscribed to Diversity in Comics, which is just a guy at the time online on YouTube that I liked listening to. I liked listening to him be funny and witty and talk about comics and the good old days. He would talk about the comics that I grew up reading when I was very young, and I would take comics from my brother's stash to read them. These were the comics of his of my comics of my childhood, were the comics of his teenager, young adult, not even teenage, just probably his young adult years, the comics from the 90s, Jim Lee X-Men and stuff like that. I remember at the time, your boy Zack was Diversity in Comics, and I liked listening to him just like shoot the shit about comic books. It was a good old time. He was funny, it made me laugh. And then he decided, I'm gonna start making comics, because some people were telling him, hey, we don't like you sharing your ideas about comics. You shouldn't share your ideas about comics. You're just some guy. You don't even know anything about comics. Like, if you think it's so easy to make good comics, why don't you do it? And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that shit. And he's been doing it at a high ass level for the past few years. Anyway, all this to say, this is kind of like how I got into this whole ComicsGate thing. But so there's one point I really wanted to make, and that was that I heart ComicsGate, and I heart because I heart comic books. I love ComicsGate, but I also love non-ComicsGate. Like, I understand not everyone who wants to be in the business of comic books, even independently, or be a fan of comic books, necessarily wants to identify with ComicsGate, either because some people are legitimately scared if they identify that they'll be blackballed and blacklisted, and that's a very true thing. But there are also other people who just disagree with some of the members or people who identify as ComicsGate, and there are also the people who just don't care one way or the other. They're just like, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I just like comics, right? And I love a lot of those people and their platforms and what they do too, especially the comic book people on the YouTube platform. Even though I follow Ethan Van Sciver and I follow your boy Zack, before them, I was following other people on YouTube talking about comics and enjoying their content. People, and I still do, people who don't identify with ComicsGate at all, and others who do. And so I just wanted to run down a list of people that I really love on YouTube, whose content I really enjoy, both inside and outside of ComicsGate. People like ComicPop. ComicPop is, man, the coolest channel on YouTube about comic books. It's where you'll find my favorite comic book podcast on the entirety of the internet, and that is the ElseworldsExchange. A great podcast with two really super cool guys, Sal of ComicPop and Joel of Caped Joel YouTube. Just two guys talking comics, having a good time, smiling, laughing, thinking, being creative, being funny. It's a good time. Like I said, it's my favorite comic book podcast on the internet to date. I don't know what the future holds. That's why I can't say of all time, but if I knew the future, then I would probably say of all time. Like, great podcast. Highly recommend it. But yeah, like I said, I also really love Comics Matter with your boy Zack, formerly Diversity in Comics. His YouTube channel is the YouTube channel I watch the most and has the most consistent stream of content. It is like a sight to behold. Like, this guy puts out content 2, sometimes 3 times a day on comic books. Again, very funny, charismatic dude, funny guy, smart guy. And he's turned talking about comic books and loving comic books into a full-on career of making comic books, which is the number one inspiration for this channel, for Mighty Jump Comics, and that is your boy Zack. Comics Matter with your boy Zack. So yeah, dude, freaking enjoy Zack's channel. By the way, shout out to the Expendables Go To Hell. It's crowdfunding right now. There is a link in the description. Go get Expendables Go To Hell. If you're asking yourself, Mighty Sam, what is Expendables Go To Hell? Well, let me tell you. Expendables Go To Hell is it's the Expendables, the guys from those movies, like those super cool action movies with lots of explosions, and like Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris and Jet Li and Dolph Lundgren and like all the cool, most bossest cool guys ever jam-packed into one movie. You know, like they made like 3 of those movies and they're all great popcorn movies. Well, Sylvester Stallone came up with this idea that was way too big for a movie, that could never be done, like the budget would never be big enough to do this movie justice. And so he tapped his friend on the shoulder, the legendary Chuck Dixon, the guy who's like written the most legendary Batman stories at DC, and your boy Zack, and the 3 of them got together to make Sly's idea for a over-the-top Expendables movie that couldn't be made into a comic book, because there are no limitations with a comic book. If you can't afford that special effect in a movie, well, you can afford to draw in a comic book. You can afford to take the story anywhere you want to go. And so Expendables Go To Hell is just that. It's a story of if the Expendables from the movies went on a mission that they didn't come back home from, that they died at, and then they went to hell, and then, you know, hell's filled with like all these horrible bad guys that need their butts kicked. So that's what they're gonna do when they get to hell. Like they're men on a mission. So, you know, the mission changes from defeat that evil terrorist warlord to defeat the inhabitants of hell. And so it's a super cool ride. It looks really cool. If you want to know what the full story is, even I don't know, because the book's not out yet. It's still being crowdfunded right now. You can get on the ground floor, click the link in the description, and go help crowdfund. Get yourself a copy of The Expendables Go To Hell. But yeah, next up, ComicExplained. Is another one of my favorite comic book channels. Also Rob Jefferson, his channel about himself, which is a spin-off of ComicExplained. Well, it's weird to say that like Rob Jefferson is a spin-off of ComicExplained when ComicExplained was created by Rob Jefferson, who is a real person. But anyway, Rob Jefferson as a channel is a really great channel, and I also suggest you go check that out. But ComicExplained, aka Rob Jefferson, is one of the most intelligent, relatable, and cool guys on YouTube. And he just, on his comic book channel, ComicExplained, he happens to be putting that intelligence and relatability and cool guyness towards comic books, which is super duper cool. I go to his channel to learn about characters and storylines I never knew or didn't bother to write, even though didn't bother to read rather. Because as much as I love comics, I haven't read every comic. And also comics are like super expensive. So rather than going out and trying to illegally download or buy every single comic, I go to Rob's channel and I listen to him and his like super smooth voice, and his very relatable and informative attitude, and he explains comic books, and it's super cool and it's a really good time. And then he has his Rob Jefferson channel where like he takes that same cool guy relatableness that he used to explain comic books and their storylines, and he uses that to like explain his own life and like the things in life and situations and triumphs and the lessons that you learn in like really cool comic books about like about standing up to evil and even like the personal evils of like your own like the things that hold you back that are on the inside. He applies those lessons to his real life and then lets you in on that. So it's like, you get to all the practicality that you can squeeze out of a comic book and how it can help you in your real life. And Rob Jefferson does those things and then lets you in on it and how it's applied in the real world, and he shares those experiences with you, and it's a really good time. So both of those guys, or it's the same dude, both of those channels rather, go check those out. Rob Jefferson, like ComicPop, ComicPop, ComicPop and ComicExplained have no affiliation with ComicsGate, and that's fine. It's totally cool. It's still other channels. ComicProSecrets, aka Ethan Van Sciver's channel, is very ComicsGate. It's, one might say, is the most ComicsGate channel you'll find. It's filled with like 20-year veteran of the comic book industry, so you're gonna find great art on his channel. He's a super enthusiastic guy, super professional, super friendly, super inviting. I think second only to Zack, or maybe in tandem. It's the both of them. Ethan Van Sciver makes me feel like I can make comics, and so that's why I'm doing this. Because I've been watching him now for like a year and a half, 2 years now, and he's always like, "Yo, if you want to do it, you can do it. You don't have to be slowed down or tethered down or stopped by anything, any circumstance, any political initiative at any company. You can do it. You can make comics." And Ethan Van Sciver's on the internet saying, "I can make comics, and so can you." And that's why I'm going to make a comic. And so yeah, like that's what if you want to make comics and like forget, even if you're not ComicsGate and you want to make comics, like watch Ethan Van Sciver's channel, subscribe to ComicProSecrets, Ethan Van Sciver's channel, and it will like get you jazzed. It will like give you that like the energy you need and like put you in the right mind space to make comics. Like the same way like bodybuilders like put on like their best like soundtrack or whatever, like workout soundtrack, and get pumped so they can go out there and like lift weights. Like listen to Ethan Van Sciver, it'll get you pumped to make comics, man. So yeah, totally check him out. Shout out to Cyberfrog and his many campaigns, and Rainbow Brute. I know his next campaign that's up. Maybe you're listening to this. I know Rainbow Brute hasn't gone up yet, but if you're listening to this sometime after the fact, maybe Rainbow Brute is going on right now. And so check his page to see if you can help support Rainbow Brute, or the next issue of Cyberfrog, or the next thing he's got going on, because his art is beautiful and he's like a ball of inspiration. So why not go help him out? Why not go be a part of that? No, help yourself out and go be a part of that. Part of the community, part of the comic. You know what I'm saying? It's really what it is, man. The next YouTube comic book creator channel that I love is a duo. It is Jason Inman and Ashley Victoria Robinson of Jawiin, the YouTube channel Jawiin. Oh my gosh. So they are like I think maybe the cutest couple in YouTube comic book area, a sphere. They're up there just being this young married couple, talking comics, talking nerd to each other, talking nerd to the camera, to the audience. It always feels like a good time. It feels like you're hanging out with that like young married couple that that like has their own place, and you go to their house and you just like talk about cool stuff with your friends and your friends group. That's what it's like going to their channel. It's just a good time. It's a good vibe, yo. Geek History Lesson is probably my second favorite comic book podcast on the internet, and it's the one I've learned the much from. I've learned so much from Geek History Lesson. I've learned things about characters that I knew, like little tidbits that I didn't know. I've been refreshed on things that I'd almost forgotten, and it's just even listening to them talk and educate about comic book characters I already do know. It's a good time. It's fun. It's really nice. You know, they do this like really cute thing where they do the meet cute for every comic book character that they talk about. So like, if you don't know, a meet cute is this thing in a romantic comedy where like the two characters like meet in a cute way, and like so movie writers try to write in a meet cute for characters in like romantic comedies and things like that. And so they do a meet cute, which is like the first time they ran into a comic book character, whether it was like in a comic book or like watching a TV show as a kid or being recommended something by a friend however many years ago. It's how they were introduced to the character. They talk about that, and then they go into a deep dive about the character and all these like cool little factoids, and it's a good time. It's a super duper good time. They too, although they're not ComicsGate, they are independent comic book creators, and they've put out 2 comic books, Jupiter Jet and Science. Both science fiction books. The second volume of Jupiter Jet is out right now, so go to their channel and subscribe and watch their videos and have a good time. And also, if you like cool science fiction comic books about girls with jetpacks, go and get yourself a copy of Jupiter Jet. That link should also be in the description if I did my job right. But yeah, man, it's a good time. Totally love Jawiin. That whole channel, what Jason and Ashley are doing there, it's a good time. The next one up, Jon Malin. Oh my gosh, Jon Malin, another super great artist with a really great and inviting channel. Jon Malin on YouTube. Super ComicsGate to the core. Hashtag ComicsGate, and we love it. Yeah, just like a super cool guy who like makes this really great art, which again, like the mainstream comics should have never kicked this guy out, never pushed him out. It's their loss. But now he's doing his own thing. He's meeting his full potential. Super enthusiastic guy. Super professional guy, super inviting guy. He's just like, hey man, come on down, make these comics. You can do it. Like a guy who's been hired by the big companies, whose art really can make it, giving you advice, much like a Ethan Van Sciver, on how to make comics and doing it and setting an example. Shout out to Graveshift, his comic book. That I don't think is going on right now, but hey, he might be putting out Graveshift Volume 3. I know Volume 1 and 2, you might be able to find it somewhere if you go onto his social stuff, on his YouTube or something. For sure, you'll be able to find the first 2 volumes, most likely, in some sort of package deal when he eventually puts out Graveshift Volume 3 out. So be on the lookout for that, or maybe it's happening right now if you're watching this video after the fact. But yeah, Graveshift, Jon Malin, good times, ComicsGate. I'm all about it. There is the next gentleman who like I just started really being into lately. But it's kind of like a better late than never type situation. And that is Whyt Manga, aka Odunze Ogugwa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I really do hope it's Odunze Ogugwa. As a fellow African, I'm a Kenyan, by the way. I'm a Kenyan man, and this is a Nigerian man. I'm super duper happy to see another like African guy in comics, who loves comics. He's not ComicsGate at all. He's doing his own thing, and it's beautiful, and I support it. And so that's why I'm mentioning him here. Dude, great comics. Fellow manga lover as well. I also love manga as much as I love comic books, and he loves manga and comic books, and we share this like philosophy about how manga and comic books are the same thing. Like there really isn't a difference between manga and comic books. It's semantics, but really they're two different words for the same thing. Again, fellow black man, fellow African comics, fellow manga lover, and just like a cool guy. I've been on his YouTube channel, watching a bunch of his stuff. It's very informative. He's always like trying to help people learn, especially artists. If you're an artist who loves comic books and manga, which are the same thing, go to Whyt Manga's channel. That's WHYT, Whyt Manga, and check out his videos. He's out here giving game for free, like the education is out here. Like people are charging how much for education? He's out here giving this game out for free. Go soak it up, and enjoy his work while you're at it. He's a really accomplished guy. I hope to like chit chat with him and maybe do some stuff with him officially in an official matter as it pertains to comic books. He has this really cool, on top of having a super cool YouTube channel, he's also putting out 2 comic book magazines. And by magazines, I mean like Shonen Jump style, comic book magazines with multiple stories in them. And he's not doing all of them himself. He's like built this publication company, was putting out SaturdayAM, which is like, it's very reminiscent of like Saturday morning cartoons. And these really cool stories, like Shonen Jump style stories for young people, adventure stories. He writes and draws one called Apple Black, which looks super duper cool, which is drawn super duper well and written well, and has these really cool ideas infused all up in them. That's SaturdayAM with a bunch of other people in their stories inside the magazine. And then he has one called SaturdayPM. And SaturdayPM is more geared towards adults and young adults. It's got sort of bloodier, gorier type stuff is allowed there, and also on the sexy side stuff over there going on in that magazine. So it's geared more towards adults. It's really cool, still really cool art, still really cool stories. He's writing a book over there too with other creators, also dropping chapters of their books over there. It's super duper it's inspiring. It's very close. It's very close to the idea of what I want to do, and so it was really cool to see someone doing something so incredibly close to the idea and the dream that I have for my own set of stories, which I'll go into at a later time. But again, Whyt Manga, Odunze Ogogu, he's doing his thing, and I see him and I dig him and I appreciate that he exists in the space, and he's not ComicsGate. And the last person I'm gonna bring up, since this video is is getting pretty long as it is Danica 19, aka Comic Book Girl 19. Dude, smart, witty, funny, super knowledgeable, and sexy AF, bro. Not ComicsGate, not anti-ComicsGate, just doing her own thing and having a good time and teaching people about art and making clothes and having podcasts and and doing it well for a long time. And yeah, like, so it's just an appreciation for like cool creators who care about what they're doing, who are passionate about comics and stories in general. And Danica's one of those people for sure. P.S. super duper secret side note with Danica. Danica, if you're listening, or if someone can put this video in front of her, dude, Danica, I think you would kill crowdfunding your own comic book. If you were to write your own comic book and get a team together to produce one, because I've been watching your videos for a long time. I see how your brain works. It's a very beautiful thing. It's even more beautiful than your form, which is already quite beautiful. If you just put that energy towards making your own comic book with the people that you have following you on social media, with the community, rather, I should say, the community you've gathered of like super cool people, dude, we totally support that. We would totally put money in your pocket to write and produce a comic. You should totally make your own comic. But yeah, like soon, like for real. But yeah, and to side note, yeah, but those are the people. Lots of them are ComicsGate, lots of them are not. I'm a ComicsGate. I'm not gonna like sort of like sidestep the idea of being ComicsGate or like to try and try to not offend somebody, like whatever. I'm not trying to offend you, but if you're offended, like, you can be. You have my permission to be offended. But I like that. I like the in the trenches idea. Like the funniest thing, like I think the most endearing thing about ComicsGate is that the conservative people are the anti-establishment people. Like, that is just like the greatest, like, it's really like having your cake and eating it too. And I think that's what I like most about ComicsGate. On top of the whole, like, it's very empowering. It's very like, you can do it. You don't let anyone stop you. You can totally make it. Also, there's this community of people who are here to support you. If your stuff is good, we will buy it. If it's not good, we'll tell you it's bad. We'll be real with you. Like, basically, if it's not good, we just won't buy it. But if it's good, we'll buy it, right? And you don't have to have, these politics, or you can have whatever politics you are, as long as while you're expressing your views, you don't talk down to anyone, kind of an attitude. And so that's why, like, as it comes to the great existential question of to ComicsGate or not to ComicsGate, I am choosing to ComicsGate. But I'm not mad at anybody who doesn't ComicsGate, and I still love people who do and don't ComicsGate, and I still would like to work with, hang out with, produce with, be friends with people both inside and outside of ComicsGate. I know there are some people in ComicsGate that are like, ComicsGate only, man. If you're not with us, you're against us. That's not. First of all, the thing about ComicsGate is like freedom. And so no one is going to tell me that I have to dislike anyone that's outside of ComicsGate. Not that there are a bunch, but in any like group, there are these like French weirdos. and they exist within like the group of people who identify as ComicsGate. Man, I don't have to listen to any of them. I can be as ComicsGate as I want and enjoy the company and camaraderie of people within ComicsGate, but also enjoy the camaraderie and friendship and fandom, whatever, of people outside of ComicsGate as much as I want. And so you have that choice. You can do that with me. If you are ComicsGate, if you're not ComicsGate, you can enjoy me. We can enjoy each other. You can like, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. You can share. You can click on a link to any one of these people's, these fine YouTubes. You can hang out here as much as you want. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, whether you're ComicsGate or not. And yeah, man, it's kind of that's what I wanted to get to. That's what I wanted to say about ComicsGate and my place in it, and like how I feel about ComicsGaters and non-ComicsGaters. It kind of was just a rant about like my favorite YouTube comic book people. But whatever, it's my channel. I can do what I want. I'm free. You can't control me. I'm ComicsGate. So yeah, just like I said before, please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. Check out for Mighty Jump Comics publications. Just have a good time. I'll see you later.